Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for a learning and growing webinar on addressing social loafing in group work. Our presenter today is Valerie Lemmon from Messiah University. My name is Sidra, and I'm a member of the marketing team here at Hawks Learning. We will have a live Q&A session after the presentation, so please enter any questions you have in the Q&A section of Zoom, and we'll answer it as we go, or more so towards the end. I will now hand it over to our lovely presenter for today. Go ahead.
Oh, hello, everybody. I am Dr. Valerie Lemmon. I'm going to share my screen with you so you can see my slides as we talk through what we're going to be doing today. Hopefully now you can see my slides. Can somebody just tell me that? Can I get like a thumbs up or something?
We can see your screen.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Alrighty, so this is what we're going to be talking about today, social loafing and group work. For most of us who have been in education for any length of time, we have our students doing group projects, and one of the things that I discovered really early on was that my students hated group work, and I couldn't figure out why. And then I started thinking about my experiences in social psychology related to social loafing, and oh my goodness, it revolutionized everything. So let me tell you a little bit about me. So I'm a professor of psychology here at Messiah University. I'm also an assistant dean in the School of Arts, Culture, and Society. I've been teaching in psychology ever since I started as an adjunct in 2005, and then I just continued on in this experience. I'm also a clinical psychologist, and so I take what I've learned from social psychology into the clinical world. And when people have difficulty in these similar situations, like with group dynamics and group work, I try to take it outside of the classroom and into the real world. I'm currently chairing the Interpersonal Violence Committee of Pennsylvania Psychological Association, and I also am a member of the Ethics Committee. I don't have any disclosures, like I'm not selling a product today. Everything that I'm sharing today is just part of my curriculum, and so you can use anything and just, give psychology away. There's a related idea in group work about social facilitation that I'd like to address first, because if we just think that group work is, fantastic and everybody loves it and everybody should do well in it, it might be because social facilitation is a real thing. It's this idea that in the presence, the mere presence, not like with some sense of being evaluated or that we like the people that we're with, just being in the presence of other people tends to help us to be more productive if we're doing something that is relatively simple or straightforward. And so being around other people makes us more productive. So that's social facilitation at its core. This goes way back to 1889. This is not a typo, my friends. This is true. 1898. Triplett did a series of experiments, really the beginning of social psychology, in which he found out that, yes, this mere presence of others facilitates us performing a task well. It was really ingenious. He had kids in a room taking like a fishing pole and winding it. And he found out that when these little kiddos were by themselves, they actually did it less fast than when they were with other kids with them, in the same room. This is fascinating, right? So they weren't given a prize. They weren't being, told that they were in competition with other people. They were just either by themselves doing a little fishing rod thing, or they were winding it with other people. Mere presence of other people. They were more productive, these little kiddos. And then we fast forward to the mid 60s with Zients, who, through a series of his own experiments, found that this mere presence again made people more productive. And he introduced this idea of arousal and generalized drive, so that we are more productive, once again, doing these simple tasks when there are other people around us. However, he also found that when the tasks were more complex, people being around us, it impaired our abilities. And this was something that was really troubling to people up until this point. We're like, wait, how come in some situations we perform better in a group and in some situations we perform worse? Well, his generalized drive theory really helped to clarify this complex situation. Yes, when we're with other people doing a simple task, we do it better. But if we're doing something that's complex and we're not quite as confident, in our abilities, other people around us tends to inhibit our task performance. Um, Go ahead to the 70s. Cottrell introduced this idea of evaluation apprehension, that if we have somebody in the group with us who we believe has more expertise than we do, that they're more competent, that they are going to evaluate us, perhaps like in a classroom, the professor, the teacher has the ability and even given the directive of evaluating the students in that group. And that's what tends to then inhibit. But if the drive comes from a sense of, ooh, this person is going to evaluate me, and I'm now motivated to impress this person or to show this person that I'm really competent, that's where this is social facilitation. So people then have increased drive to demonstrate their skillfulness because they believe that this other person is going to evaluate their skills. So this apprehension is not a negative thing here in this theory. This is about facilitating performance. All right. So there are a bunch of factors in contrast to social facilitation. There are a number of things that get in the way of group decision making and productivity. So again, when we're thinking about students in a setting like a classroom where they're doing a group project together, there are a bunch of things that get in the way. So Latane and his colleagues introduced the social impact theory, and this has a bunch of components. I'm going to spend most of the time talking about social loafing, but there are some other things that relate. So in social impact theory, there is the diffusion of responsibility. And this is this idea that if we believe that each person, they believe that they have less influence and they have less responsibility. And that some students then don't contribute as much because they're pretty confident that somebody else is gonna chip in and that they're gonna take on tasks in the project. So I don't have to do as much work because the other people will do it. And so social loafing is directly related to this. And this is the idea that some people are going to exert less effort rather than more because they think that other people are going to do more. And this is particularly relevant that as the size of the group increases, each individual is going to participate less. I'm going to talk more about that in a later slide. There's a related concept of free riding. This is the idea that, I'm going to get something for nothing. So sometimes in group work, one person will do absolutely nothing. But if the grade is the same for everybody in the group, that one person is gonna benefit from everybody else's work. And there's also a related sucker effect. And this is when people are less motivated because they believe that there's some inequity going on here and they do not want to be taken advantage of. So like, I don't want to be the one doing all the work and this other person then is going to get the same grade as me. No way. So that person ends up pulling back. And so what we have then is a whole bunch of people don't want to contribute. All right, so let's talk more about social loafing because this is really at the heart of the problem of a lot of group work. So in 1979 at Ohio State University, Latane and his colleagues did this whole series of studies in which they had participants in a group of 6 people. They put blindfolds on all of them, and they were in a semicircle, and they were all wearing headphones. And through the headphones, they could hear sounds of either clapping or shouting. And so they couldn't hear themselves because of the headphones, and they couldn't see or hear because of the blindfolds and the headphones what the other people were doing or yeah, what they were doing, either clapping or shouting. So that all they knew was that they were in this group of 6 people, and then they were told to either clap as loudly as they could or to shout as loud as they could. And they believed that they were either doing this by themselves or that they were doing it as a part of a group. And what they found was that when the participants thought that other people were either clapping or shouting, they produced a third less sound than when they believed that they were doing this by themselves. So this was like groundbreaking, this idea that people were less likely to contribute to the outcome of the group when they thought that other people were also contributing. This is like a sobering piece of science that helps us to understand why people are less productive in a group. And so this then relates to what we talked about in a previous slide, Cottrell's contribution of evaluation apprehension. What this series of studies suggested was that there was decreased apprehension, evaluation apprehensive, because they were like, I'm not accountable to these people. They're not evaluating my efforts, so I don't have to do as much. So this is really where I started with my own students in thinking about how to help my students to be less likely to engage in their own social loafing. So this is what I started doing. In my own classrooms, I became very transparent about the theory. I said, this is what I know about social loafing. I would talk about it in my classes. Now, fortunately, because I was teaching psychology, it was easy for me to infuse a psychological principle into my classes. But I believe that this applies to any classroom in any setting, because psychology has application regardless of whether we're talking about, a class in biology, or we're talking about mathematics, or we're talking about, music, or any of the other arts. We need to understand these psychological principles that relate to why groups are not so productive. So I just teach them about the theory, and I explain to them what my expectations are regarding social loafing, and that I'm not going to have it in my class. I'm not going to have it in their group, because part of the purpose of doing a group project really relates back to social facilitation. I believe that groups can be more productive than an individual. We get diversity of experiences, we get diversity of perspectives and talents, and so each person then is bringing their own unique set of talents and experiences into the group, which can make the group function better from a social facilitation perspective. And that's why I don't want to have social loafing creeping into. So I've got 3 components that I spell out in the syllabus, and that I talk about in the class. So at the very beginning of the semester, I explicitly talk about social loafing. I talk about the sucker effect and free riding, and how we are not going to have any of these in this class. And I explain, why this is so important and why I want them to know about it. I also explain how once upon a time, I thought that group work was great. And I thought that everybody would love it as much as I did, and that we were going to have fun in my classes. And wow, didn't I, end up feeling really foolish when I figured out that people didn't love the group projects that I was assigning. They weren't having fun, and they certainly weren't learning from it. And so I talk about my past mistakes in group work as a professor, and how I've now constructed this to even learn from my own mistakes. So I'm very transparent about this. I hope that my own vulnerability helps them to understand why I put such a premium on group work now. So instead of just abandoning group work and saying, nope, never going to do it again, I say group work is important. Let's do it better. And I also talk very explicitly about the size of the group. Latane and other people, they discovered that a group of about 5 or more it starts getting too big. You can go about up to 5 people in a group, but the research suggests that when you get to 6 and greater, the group just becomes less effective simply because of the size of the group. So I make sure that my groups are never bigger than 5. I prefer a group of 4 because that tends to even out the work and tends to reduce the sense that somebody else is going to do it. So yeah, I like my groups to be 4. All right, component number 2, I introduced the antisocial loafing plan. And so they then learn that they have the responsibility to really work on important parts of a productive group. And that is trust and being trustworthy and those kinds of things, engaging in cooperation rather than competitiveness, holding one another accountable rather than just, I'm just going to go do this by myself and we're all going to get the same grade and it'll be fine because I trust myself and I don't trust you. No. We've got to learn to become interdependent and being accountable. And the antisocial loafing plan also makes them work within the group rather than relying on me as the instructor. So I used to have students, partway through the semester or even at the end of the semester when it was way too late to address it, they would come to me and they'd be like, Dr. Lemmon, people are loafing in my group and you just need to know. I want them to address it. So the antisocial loafing plan requires them to address it in their group before they come to me asking me to address it. And so I'll talk about how I do this. And the good news about this is that since I've started this strategy, I rarely have students coming to me and complaining about their group members or asking me to intervene. It just doesn't happen because they do it either in a proactive or in a reactive way, but I've got a plan for each step along the way. Third component of the antisocial loafing plan is that I make this process worth so many points that in their final grade, that if any student engaged in social loafing, they cannot get an A in the class. They simply cannot. So I take the total number of points for the whole class of all the assignments that they've been giving, whether it's the points that they're doing as part of their group or it's the points they're getting just as an individual. And that's the denominator. And I make the numerator such that they cannot get an A in the class if they engage in social loafing. And that has really revolutionized people's motivation because there's the apprehension, there's the evaluation apprehension. They know that I have the power to assign the grade at the end of the semester, and so that's what happens. So here are the antisocial loafing plan assignments. This is all contained in my syllabus. This is how I describe it. This is what is in verbatim. So that they need to submit an antisocial loafing note before the final assignment is due, and that there are 3 ways that they can earn these points. Now, I'm not going to read what's in the subsequent slides to you because you all are intelligent and I don't want to insult your intelligence. So there are these 3 ways they can do a prevention strategy, they can do a confrontation strategy, or they can respond to the confrontation. No matter what strategy they choose, they have to document it and they have to submit it either as an individual or as part of the group. Anybody who doesn't submit their document, they get no points. And so therefore they can't get an A in the class. So here's the prevention strategy. They work on the prevention together as a group. They submit the prevention strategy action plan as a group, and then they all get X number of points. Again, you would tailor make that for your class. I just use the numerator and denominator system, and that works really well for me. And so this is what they write in their note. They say, my group successfully addressed social loafing by engaging in the following plan of action. And then they fill it in here. They say, my group is successful in preventing social loafing because, and they write it here. Sometimes this is very, very brief. They say, we met, every other week to talk about how we're building trust and how we are engaging in cooperation, how we're delegating tasks, and how we're remaining accountable to one another. And as long as they work on this together, I accept it in good faith, because then they're not going to come to me at the end of the semester complaining about social loafing in a group member. And I go, great, success. So this is what most of my groups do. But sometimes they have to do a confrontation strategy. And so if they observe one of their members engaging in social loafing, they are directed to confront that person by themselves. I don't want this to become a big shaming experience. And so they go by themselves. They document these interactions. I give them the forms. All of this is, available to them. And so, yeah, so they go and they talk to the group member, and this is what they do. They document how they address social loafing in the group by individually addressing it with the name of the person. This person responded in this particular way, explaining what was happening with them. And I'm now assured that social loafing isn't occurring. Or after I address the social loafing, the person responded in a way that suggested social loafing was still occurring. And so that they have to then go on to step 2. And so they then go with other people in the group. So then they go not just by themselves, but with everybody else in their group, and they go and they confront together. And so then the next steps are pretty much the same. The person that we confronted, assured me that social loafing was no longer occurring, or I still think that social loafing is happening. I went by myself, I went with everybody else in my group, it's still happening. You go to the next step. So step 3, that's when they bring in the big guns. That's when they bring in me. So now they've gone. Now they go 3 times to confront their classmates about this. And so again, all the other steps look really similar, except that now in this 3rd step, I'm involved. I will tell you this: since I started doing the antisocial loafing plan, I've only had to do this one time with me, one time. And the student in the group was just really quite oblivious about how their behavior was affecting their classmates, their group mates, and they needed me to explain it to them. So that's really how that all works. And then this other component is that if the person who's been confronted with social loafing, they have to then document their response of how they basically, how they responded to the confrontation. And so this lays out how they document that. And so this is it. This is their confrontation response. These are the steps. I told, this is, again, this is just the flip side of the previous slides that we looked at. So I'm not going to belabor this. So so this is how we go through the entire confrontation process. Most of my students do not enjoy being confronted. They don't enjoy it any more than doing the confrontation. But these are the steps of the confrontation and the confrontation response. The difference here is that at the end, after being confronted, my group members and I agree to disagree about whether, I, as a student, engage in social loafing. I agree. I understand that Dr. Lemmon has the final authority to decide on the preponderance of the evidence regarding the merit of me earning the antisocial loafing points in light of the series of events that have transpired and the documentation. So I look at all of the documents and I decide at the end, what do I believe that this student earns in terms of their grade. And so, in these situations, I try to really highlight, an Adlerian quote, and that is overcoming difficulties leads to courage, self-respect, and knowing yourself. So instead of making the confrontation this really negative thing, I try to highlight that this is actually a positive thing that they've experienced, that they're becoming better people, and they're growing through this experience. So, questions, comments, concerns?
So we have one private question. Has this ever backfired?
I have never seen this backfire. Um, I have students suggest that they were unaware that they were social loafing and that they become a little ashamed of it, but never to the point where they've just like completely like, I'm out, I'm not doing. Well, is that true? No, false. I have had a couple of students who are just like, nope, this group work is too hard. And they've actually dropped my class. But then the group is big enough because if I start with a group of 4 and now they're just a group of 3, they can still function really, really well together. And that person who's just like, nope, I don't want to learn this stuff. This is, basically no amount of confrontation was going to be helpful. They just dropped the class completely. So I haven't seen it backfire on the group members that really, really want to learn and they really want to develop their skills.
Thank you. Do you assign the groups that the students work in, or do you let them choose their own groups?
Yes, I have learned that when they choose their own groups, that sometimes it's been problematic. You get kids who don't know anybody else. I call them kids. I teach college. I have students who don't know anybody else, and then sometimes they're just they. And so then I've got groups who really like one another, and then groups who don't really know each other. So I assign the groups, and that way they all come in with the same benefits and risks as any other group. I actually had one group one semester, simply through coincidence, they were in a group. All 4 of them were in another class in a group, and they did not like each other at all. And when they found that they were assigned to the same group in my class, they were horrified and they were like, this is terrible. At the end of the semester, no joke, they were all crying because they were so sad that they were leaving each other. Best functioning group ever. So you never know.
Perfect, thank you. Do you think that social isolation from COVID will result in more intervention being necessary to facilitate group work?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I already see it. Um, more social anxiety, more evaluation apprehension that's not making people being more productive. It's making the people just be more anxious and then withdrawing. And part of what I'm driven by is helping people to overcome their anxiety. And so we need to press in to difficult situations. And so as educators, we need to be sensitive to that, and support them. And so antisocial loafing really calls out what the problem is, and then helps give them the skills to overcome it instead of just like you're in a difficult situation, you just withdraw. Nope, nope, nope. Press in instead of withdrawing.
That's perfect. So,
Mhm.
how do you address social loafing within a group of coworkers?
Mhm. Um, I think very similarly. I try to educate people about what social loafing is. I even use examples like from like the entertainment, the restaurant world. Have you ever noticed that if you go to a restaurant and if you're in a group of 8 and everybody's going to be on the same bill, they automatically add in a gratuity? It's because of social loafing, because everybody assumes that somebody else is going to put in a tip. And so I'll use a common example like that helps to illustrate why social loafing is so ubiquitous. It's everywhere. Even if we go out to dinner with 7 of our closest friends, we assume somebody else is going to put in a bigger tip, so I put in less. No, everybody's got to chip in.
That makes sense. Are there any different strategies or techniques that are necessary for online courses?
That's a great question. I need to think about that some more. I think even when I have, group work in online classes, I try to still keep it really, really transparent so that I can see all the work that's going on. So when I do, if I'm doing like breakout groups in Zoom, or if I'm having, online discussion groups and they're broken out into smaller groups, I just make it so that I can see everything, and so that I can intervene, but again, I try to really help them to be accountable to their group, and highlighting what it is that they're supposed to be doing in their small groups, as opposed to just sitting back and waiting for me. So that's why, yeah, I think helping them to facilitate knowing what their skills are and what their tasks are. And this is where, giving somebody a specific job of being the recorder of what are we doing in the group today, and rotating that position around can be really helpful to reduce social loafing, so that everybody has increased accountability, even online, maybe especially online.
That definitely makes sense. Can this technique be used for a semester-long project?
Oh, yes, absolutely. In my group dynamics class, this is what this really applies to. They have a group project that they're assigned at the very beginning of the semester, and they have to do it all throughout the semester. So I'm checking in on them at like 3 points during the semester, and then they have a big group presentation at the end. And so, yeah, I actually think this is perfect for a semester long project, because part of it is too is that I'm hoping that they're building and developing their trust, for one another, and their accountability as they're balancing the tension between tasks and relationships, right? Because in group work, that's what we need to attend to. Because I'm telling you, almost every semester in group dynamics, one of my groups, one of the people would experience some kind of a catastrophe, a loss in their personal lives. So, somebody, lost a sibling during the semester, and how do we support that person? Somebody else, had, experienced homelessness during the semester. How do we support that person? And so social loafing is really, really different when we're talking about somebody who needs to go attend to, a funeral, or is experiencing a significant economic setback, right? So we're talking about supporting somebody over time. Yeah.
That sounds really awesome. So this next one is a two-part question. Do you think this is a fair process when considering introverts versus extroverts? And also, does it ever cause someone to have to reveal their learning disability when they may not want to?
Mm. So I see introversion and extroversion on a continuum. So I think we all have some degree in which, we are, where the group facilitates our involvement. When I think of introversion and extroversion on a continuum, I think about how being in a group, it's less about the social components of it, and it's more about getting the tasks done. Now, I just a minute ago said that we're still balancing out tasks and relationships. And I think that introverts are often really, really good in small groups. Um, and so, yeah, I think that again is why I make sure that my groups are never bigger than 5. But again, I prefer groups of 4, um, 4 members. And so introverts often do really, really well in a small group, as long as we're building, that trust and that accountability. Um, And the second part about learning disability. This is where I really hope that my students trust me, and that if they need some, some extra support, particularly related to learning, that I can help them to figure out how they can either choose not to reveal that because it's nobody else's business, and how they might engage in some compensatory strategies to get around that. And so, yeah, so I would like to support my students in figuring out whether they want to or need to reveal something to the group members, even in the cases of, like I cited earlier, like somebody experiences a loss. They usually reveal that to me first, and I help them to figure out whether they need to or want to reveal. So I say to my students, you reveal as much or as little as you are comfortable with. I, of course, also then, talk about the safety and bravery concept, right? So that learning isn't just about being safe, but it's also about being brave. And I recognize if there's some tension there. So this is all very nuanced. And this is why I work really hard to develop relationships with each one of my students so that they can come to me and explain to me what's going on. So that if they believe they are being falsely accused, I can support them in that endeavor. So it's not just me going to confront a student, but it's me helping to support that one student who may be being falsely accused of loafing when they're really not, when there's something else going on. And how can I support them? I hope that that's helpful and answers the question.
It does. Have you ever had to switch people around to different groups?
I have not. I have found that the groups either figure out how to, make it through the semester. Not all of them become high functioning groups, like the one group of students who, were so sad to end the semester with each other. But I have had some students drop my class. Yeah, because as soon as they find out that group work is not just going to be a chance for them to free ride, or to get something for nothing, that they realize that this is actually going to be hard. Some of them drop my class, and you know what? I'm fine with that, because I'd rather have fewer people in the class who are really invested in learning and building trust and accountability than somebody who just wants a free ride.
That's absolutely true. Do you ever need to address cultural diversity within your groups, and how are those confrontations conducted?
Yeah, absolutely. Part of my class in group dynamics, I actually do a whole section about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and so it's embedded into the curriculum of the course. Yeah, absolutely. And I really highlight that there are benefits of having a more diverse group, and that we should tap into the strengths of the diversity rather than looking at this as being something that's going to be limiting. So I try to be more strength-based rather than have this be something that we have to like confront. But if there's something that we have to confront, I'll take it on. But if I need to know, first of all, what it is that we're confronting.
That absolutely makes sense. Would you say that group work is a regularly occurring part of your class, or would you say that group project happens occasionally during the semester?
In this particular group, in this particular class called Group Dynamics, it's inherent in the class. In other classes that I teach, I have group work being more or less depending on the subject matter. But I always try to build a community of learners so that even if they're not doing an explicit group project, that at the end of the semester, I almost invariably have students presenting the work that they've been working on individually throughout the semester. And then I have the other students in the class give them feedback about how they benefited from that presentation. And then that becomes part of their grade too. so that the process of giving and receiving feedback is really, it's a mini group project every time somebody presents. And so yeah, even when it's more implicit rather than explicit, I'm always highlighting the value of working cooperatively in a group. And that means sometimes giving some tough feedback. Like, I didn't really understand when you explained X, Y, and Z in your presentation. Could you help me to understand that better? And because I do most of that in writing, in a written form, they get a chance to then go back and forth. So it's not just happening like in the classroom. So that can happen either live in person or it can happen in an online class. So it all works.
That absolutely makes sense. So you provide feedback for the students, but do the students ever assess their other team members?
Yes. Yep. That's part of what they do at the end of the semester.
Thank you for clarifying. There's a couple of questions regarding sharing resources that you went over, such as the, one second, as the form that you had explained, or your PowerPoint. Will you be sharing that information?
Yeah, I'm happy to share my my PowerPoint slides. The slides really contain the plan. So I just put it in at the end of the syllabus, and I have them as forms so that they can fill it out. And then if you're using like a learning management system, like we use Canvas here, they can just upload that form into the course. And so everything's nice and electronic, so people can see. But I'm happy to share my antisocial loafing plan with people, and if people want to use it, I do not have it copyrighted. I get no royalties, so please use it. Like I said, I believe in giving psychology away. So how do I do that? We can talk about that after we wrap up here today. I can figure out how I can get my PowerPoint slides to the folks who are here today.
Yeah, absolutely. We can totally do that.
Great.
So there are no other questions. It looks like that's all the time we have today. Thank you,
Right.
Lemmon, and thank you all for attending. If you or any of your fellow instructors are interested in presenting for our Learning and Growing webinar series, please submit your proposal to the Learning and Growing website, which I'm going to go ahead and link in the chat right now. And we will be emailing you a link of this recording. We were recording the webinar for today once it becomes available. And I hope everyone has a great rest of your day. Thank you.